What up, people? And welcome to another installment of MMT Mondays. I'm Commie John with Real Progressives, and boy, do we have a juicy morsel of MMT knowledge to shove down your brain holes this evening. We're going to be looking at a couple clips of a 2013 debate between Bob Murphy and Warren Mosler. And they're going to be comparing and contrasting Austrian economic perspective versus MMT. I think this debate does a good job of bringing up a lot of the issues and misconceptions people who don't really understand MMT yet have, and it addresses them. And Warren Mosler does a fantastic job of knocking every one of Bob Murphy's gotcha questions out of the park. And he uses a couple really spot-on analogies to kind of explain that stark difference between the currency issuer, which is the U.S. government, and currency users, which is everybody else. This first clip starts off with Bob Murphy making an analogy to a government deficit spending as a family deficit spending. And, like robbing banks to cover their deficit or whatever. And obviously, Mosler shuts it down, and he makes an analogy, again, specifying the differences between a currency issuer and currency users by using subway tokens. Warren Mosler, he makes it make sense. He simplifies it down into terms everybody can understand. God, he is truly the godfather of MMT. So enjoy. We'll come back and discuss.
That's the Austrian perspective. As far as his proposals, let me just give you an analogy. I think I got about 1 minute left in this segment of the reply here. Let me just give you an analogy. Obviously, we've got different people in here. Some of you have read his book inside and out. Some of you are very new to this. So let me just walk you through in terms of his perspective and where he's coming from. It's not that I think the stuff in his book is wrong necessarily, and some of it I actually agree with wholeheartedly, but a lot of the stuff that I think he's saying is technically correct, but it's very misleading, or even more to the point, somebody might erroneously conclude from what he says that's technically true something that's the wrong thing to do. So let me give you this analogy. There's a wife and a husband sitting at the table. They're looking at the family budget, and she's just like, you know what, honey, our expenses, we cut this, we cut that. I need to go take a second job. That's the only way we can make ends meet. And he has an epiphany. He goes, no. I'm just going to put on a ski mask and go down and start holding up liquor stores. We're not constrained by our budget anymore. And she says, what, are you insane? You keep doing that. You push that too much, that policy, and you're going to end up in prison. And he goes, okay, you're right, but I just want us to focus on the real constraint here. It's not about our budget. It's about me going to prison. So let's just, at least now that we're thinking clearly about the things constraining our behavior and our spending. Okay, so is what the husband there said wrong? Well, technically, no. He's right. That really the ultimate thing stopping you from spending too much is that you go to prison if you're holding up liquor stores, not that you need to get a job and get income. But you can see how, in my mind, at best, he has provided a distraction, and at worst, he's going to justify more spending than they really can afford and do something that would be even worse than running up your credit card to go hold up liquor stores. So that's when I take Warren to be saying, Social Security is not in crisis. What are you kidding me? We just run the printing press. Duh. That, to me, he's not helping, and in fact, if he's encouraging people to spend more, the politicians to spend more than they otherwise would, I actually think that's a very dangerous thing, and inflation is arguably a worse cure than even taxing, and where we see where the money's coming and going.
Warren, I'm going to, we're up to the moderator's questions now, and my first question is going to be, are you robbing liquor stores? How do you respond?
Well, what we have to look at is the difference between the issuer and the user of anything. So I'm going to use an example of subway tokens. Am I dating myself? How long has it been since the city had subway tokens?
At least a decade.
That's when I used to live here, when I was at Bankers Trust. So did everybody remember how subway tokens worked? Yes, okay. And so if you go down to the train station and you bring somebody to New York, they say, oh, I see how it works. First, they collect the tokens and then they sell them. And I go, yeah, I know it looks like that, but no, really, they sell them first and then they collect them. Well, how do you know that? They're just going around and around. Well, you know that they're the issuer of the subway token, where they sell them first and then they collect them. And if you look at the city, the city can't collect its tokens until after it gets them out there. The issuer of anything can't collect anything until after it gets it out there. The rest of us, we can't use tokens until we have to buy them first, get them, exchange dollars for tokens before we can spend them. The city has to exchange tokens for dollars before they can collect them. Okay? Likewise, with the U.S. dollar, the U.S. government is the issuer of the U.S. dollar in this sense. Now, I know there are all these definitions floating around. The dollars that can be used to pay taxes come only from the U.S. government or their counterfeit. And technically speaking, a tax payment is a reserve drain on the bank. It's inside money. It's a debit to their reserve account. Only the Fed can add reserves that can then get debited, either directly or through an overdraft or through some other way. But because you're the issuer of the dollar, think of it, if you've got $1 in your pocket, how did it get there if it's not counterfeit? The government spent it. It came from the government. It can't come from anywhere else. And the government hasn't taxed it yet, or you wouldn't have it. Now, I know it's a little bit simplistic because there's government lending, but we're just trying to focus on this one point. All right, and so the point here is there's a dramatic difference between the issuer and the user. So if New York City owed me $5 million, I'd be a lot more worried about their ability to pay me than if they owed me 5 million subway tokens. All right, I'm pretty sure they'd be able to get me the tokens.
Warren, you should check out Metro cards because they, in some ways, make your point even better. You could ask, where does the city get the credits that it puts on your Metro cards for rides?
Right.
And
right.
the answer is it doesn't get them from anywhere.
Right. And you've got to get credits before you can ride.
Right. But the subway system doesn't need to obtain the credits from anybody.
Right. But neither can they debit your credits until after they've given them to you. So the user has to get the thing first before he can use it. That's all of us with dollars. That's the states, the corporations, individuals. We all have to get dollars to be able to spend or our checks bounce, exactly like Professor Murphy was saying. The government, on the other hand, is in the opposite position. It has to spend them first or lend them first before it can collect them. And the way they say it inside, the insiders say it, is you can't have a reserve drain without a reserve add. And in the old days, before all the excess reserves were there, when the Treasury was borrowing, the Fed was in doing repos. They got to add the reserves before they can subtract them. You got to spend first before you can collect. It's just point of logic.
Bob, what do you? Do you want to respond to that? A lot of Austrians would say that government spending is disastrous, but Warren's making the point that the government needs to spend for dollars to enter the system.
Well, I'm not.
Well, sorry.
Okay. I'm saying it can't collect them until after.
Right. It cannot collect them until after it spends them.
And that's the difference. That's why a household gets in trouble because they have to collect first before they can spend. The U.S. can't be in that position with a floating exchange rate currency. Now, in a gold standard, which was the context of the original Austrian writings, yes. If the government spends and doesn't tax, it runs out of gold with defaults, and the system's is in default. Okay, and you wind up devaluing, and it's a disaster. Which is what happened in Argentina, which happens in all of Russia in '98, all the fixed exchange rate blow-ups where the money was backed by reserves, and the government put themselves in a similar position where they have to collect first before they can spend. The European governments used to be in a position where Greece would spend drachma first and then collect it. They never had a solvency problem. They turned themselves into what are like U.S. states, where now they have to get euro before they can spend them. They got a major solvency problem. The European Central Bank spent €1 trillion last month or whenever it was. Nobody asked, where did you get it? Did you borrow it from China or did you tax it? All they did was credit their accounts and their books. Now, can excess spending, excess demand drive the prices?
Let's
okay,
before you anticipate all his answers, let's try to.
Okay. I'll make a few points just on this one little issue. So first of all, John said to Warren, are you in favor of robbing liquor stores? And he didn't deny it. I just want to, it could have been oversight, but just wanted as a point of order in the debate.
We have a Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
The Austrian economic perspective is basically gold standard economic rules and whatever, which is just obsolete stuff. We're not on a gold standard. And that's one of the things we have to make very clear. We are not on a gold standard. We don't have a fixed quantity of money. We have a fiat currency with the government as the monopolist, basically. Any money that's in the economy that you have in your pocket or in your bank account, it's all money that was issued at one time by the federal government that has just not been collected in taxes. It's as simple as that. And man, I'm telling you, go watch this whole debate and the question and answer session from the audience afterwards. Oh, it's just fantastic. It is such a great learning tool. And I just don't think Bob Murphy was prepared for the onslaught of MMT lessons he learned that day. But, yeah, again, if you take nothing else away from this video, take away that in our current system today, the government is the currency issuer of the dollar. They have the monopoly power to issue the dollar. Nobody else can do it. So this next clip does a real good job because, again, it starts with Bob Murphy making a silly analogy about like a CEO stealing his employee's pension and, saying, well, I can just print more money like the government does. I think it addresses a little more kind of the taxes, the idea that taxes do not fund spending. The government does not need our revenue. And again, it differentiates, again, the currency issuer from the user, because Bob Murphy doesn't seem to understand that. Through an hour of being told there's a difference and we're not on a gold standard, he just doesn't. He keeps, coming at him with the, this obsolete economic knowledge, I guess. And I think Warren Mosler does a great job of using his business card analogy to really hammer the point home of like how taxes do not fund spending, how tax collection or tax law enforcement really gives the money its value and creates a demand for it. And that taxes are important, it's just not a source of revenue for the government as the monopoly issuer. So again, enjoy this clip. This is probably my favorite. I think at this point in the debate, Bob Murphy knows that he's in way over his head. So I hope y'all enjoyed as much as I do, but here it is.
So let me just give you a hypothetical scenario and you tell me how you would respond to it. So there's this CEO and the 60 Minutes or somebody's doing this expose and they get the guy on camera and I think they got him good because they said, our auditors went in, he's a CEO of a major corporation, and they said for decades you have been telling your employees you've been taking out 10% from their paychecks to put aside to fund their pensions, and you've promised them specific payments. Our auditors came in and looked at your books and we found you haven't been investing in outside assets. You've been mostly giving it as dividends to your shareholders to boost your stock prices, giving yourselves bonuses, and you're investing a little bit in a factory. And now, you're an underfunded pension by about like $10 billion. What do you have to say for yourself before you go to prison? And he says, whoa. I've been reading Warren Mosler, and let me tell you something. For one, this is just a completely arbitrary thing. If the Congress would just let us print our own $100 bills, there would be no underfunded pension. This is all a fake crisis. Yeah. And in fact, because demand right now is insufficient, we would be doing the economy a favor if Congress would go ahead and just change these arbitrary rules which make it illegal for us to run the color copier and print off $100 bills. That's a completely arbitrary thing. Right. How come the Treasury or the Fed can do it and we can't do it? That's stupid. It's not like it has to be a piece of gold. It's just paper with symbols on it. If the Congress would just change this arcane rule saying that their money's good and ours isn't legal tender, all of a sudden this so-called underfunded pension disappears like that and we create jobs. So there you go. Yeah. And, of course, the 60 Minutes guy is floored.
I'd sentence that guy to 30 years in the electric chair.
Because why?
He's demanding the ability to counterfeit. Fine. He knows there's no counterfeiting allowed. I mean, that's, knows or should have known that you're not allowed to counterfeit money. He's committed fraud for his employees. He's a user of the currency. He can't spend it until after he gets it. He's not the issuer. And that's how the game is set up. You could be playing in a poker game and say, hey, this is not fair. Give me the deck and let me put any cards I want in my hand.
So the follow-up, I guess, that is if it's fraud when a person does it, why is it okay when the government does it?
Right. So let's say we're in a card game.
Right.
And I'm the scorekeeper. It's like, how many points do I have? I don't have any. All right. Well, then how do I give you 100 points? Well, I just write them down in your account. I write them down in your account. Okay. And then you lose. Do I have fewer points? No. And then somebody else has a bad hand and I take points away. Do I have more to give to the next person? No. Somebody in the card game says, well, that's not right. I should be able to just change my own score. Like, fine, you want to have a card game where people can change their own score? It's not going to work. It's not going to function. You're not going to be able to provision the government. The whole point of the monetary system, the initial point, or what I would say as a point of logic, the whole point, I know there are other points, lots of lobbyists have all kinds of points in their monetary, is to provision government. Okay? You want to be able to move people from the private sector, move real resources from the private sector to the public sector. People get together. I like these people who get together and say, hey, we hate government. We're just going to get together ourselves and agree to do this. Well, that is government, right? And so you start off and you say, we would like to have an army. We would like to have a legal system. Well, how do you get people to move from the private sector to the public sector? You could ask for volunteers. It doesn't really work all that well. It's been tried. The way that we do it, now they might come up with a better way, is you slap on a tax and something that nobody has, and then in order to get the funds to pay that tax, you've got to come to the government form, and that way the government can spend its otherwise worthless currency to provision itself. Now, the way I like to do that, to explain that, is I take out my business card here, and I ask, does anybody in this room want to buy? And this is called How to Turn Litter into Money. Does anybody want to buy one of these cards? They're $100? No? Okay. Does anybody want to stay afterwards and help vacuum the floor and clean the room? I'll give you my cards. No. Right. Oh, by the way, there's only one door out of here, and my guy is out there with a 9mm, and you can't get out here without one of these cards. Can you feel the pressure now? You are now unemployed. You are not, in terms of my cards, you were not unemployed before. You were not looking for a job that paid in my cards. Now you're looking for a job that pays my cards, or you're looking to buy them from somebody else who will take a job that pays in my cards.
Bob,
Okay.
do you want to? You could have one more rebuttal, and then we'll move to questions.
Sure. So let me just clarify where I was going with that analogy in case it wasn't obvious. Is I think that's exactly what you say about Social Security. That he said, yeah, it's a phony crisis. You know, people on the right, Tea Party types, might say the government's been spending that money. There is no trust fund. It's underfunded. But no, there's no constraint. They can just print off the money.
There's no nominal crisis.
Okay.
It could be a real crisis if there's not enough food for the people, older people.
Right. Okay.
If there's not enough housing, you can give them all the money you want. You can't buy what isn't there.
But my hypothetical CEO's response is analogous to what you think the guy running Social Security should say.
And again, the difference between the issuer of a currency and the user of a currency. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's government. You know, and I'm not saying that you can't come up with a better system.
And the last thing, there's no one out there with a 9mm. Just to do it, right?
Yeah,
and
for our audience at
in
home,
which case
there's
this
no
thing
idea.
goes from being money back to litter.
I hate that.
The difference between money and litter is whether there's the tax man. The guy with the 9mm is the tax man.
So
If
let's-
you can't enforce tax collection, the value of the dollar goes to zero.
Let's turn.
Good stuff, good stuff. Again, I would urge everyone to watch this debate in its entirety, as it really addresses some key points and answers a lot of the crucial questions that many of you might have about MMT. And Warren Mosler, who by all rights is the godfather of modern money, really does a good job of simplifying these concepts in easy to understand terms and analogies. You know, and I don't know. I guess if I would leave you with anything, it's that the reason it's so imperative that we all collectively, as a citizenry, learn MMT and learn how our federal monetary system works is that the sooner we all get on board, the sooner we can show up with an angry mob at Nancy Pelosi's house or Mitch McConnell's mansion or whatever and demand that they do their goddamn jobs. You know, let them know that we understand how the game works, that we're not broke, that we don't have to borrow money from China in order to have health care for everybody in this country, that we can do it right now. And as much as I enjoy this debate that Warren Mosler is just endlessly backhanding Bob Murphy and his, you know, obsolete logic, and is that I think of where we could be right now if 7 years ago, when this debate took place, we all got on board and demanded that our federal government, using their power of the purse as the monopoly currency issuer in this system, to fix shit. And where would we be today if 7 years ago we let them know that we know how it works and we're done playing their games and going along with their bullshit? God damn. Let's not go another 7 years. Let's learn it now. Let's let them know now that we know and that the jig is up. and we're coming for that toothbrush. Thanks, guys, for joining in. Signing off from Rebel Headquarters, I'm Commie John with Real Progressives. Stay vigilant, comrades.